Welcome. I'm Nicholas Wilson.
And I'm Cynthia Calori.
You are watching
And listening
to This Could Go Either Way.
What he said.
All right. So today we have conspiracy theories.
Dun, dun, dun. I'm just going to say this. I am pro conspiracy theory. I'm into this shit.
Falling down the rabbit hole.
I went down the rabbit hole and I'm living there now.
I would consider myself to be a bit of a skeptic. Not that I am completely against it all. There's obviously been some real conspiracies that have happened. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm starting to think the whole theory part is, I feel like a lot of this has happened or it is happening to me. I mean.
So how would you define a conspiracy theory?
Shit's going down and we don't realize it, or we have, as I like the phrase, we have abdicated our role as members of the society as far as governing the actual government as part of the people. And I also just feel like so many people want to just ignore the realities, and I'm literally one of those people that I'm like, just leave me alone in my living room and just let me live my life. But at the same time, I don't know, after digging into all this, I feel like this is fucked up shit going on. So again, I don't like to dive into it normally too much, but for the sake of the episode, I really let myself go.
My definition would probably be simpler. I would define a conspiracy theory as the idea that something is being purposely hidden from us, but consensus hasn't come to your side or doesn't agree with your evidence at this point.
That's probably a way better way to say it. Mine's the very
not that it's definitely not true, right? But the evidence or lack thereof has not convinced enough people or not been corroborated in enough ways. Because there are real conspiracies where the truth comes out. Right? Like you have things like the Tuskegee experiments, where they injected a bunch of black guys with syphilis, just to see what would happen. Or MK Ultra. You ever seen the movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
Yes.
That's based on real stuff.
Oh shit, I didn't know that. That's with George Clooney, right?
Yeah, MK Ultra is all about mind control and pumping people full of LSD.
And he talks about that, one of the CIA being just a bunch of mind control experiments, at least a lot of
that's
CIA
what, MK Ultra was all about mind control and telepathy and not necessarily controlling other people's minds, well, that it was involved, but also being able to get the full potential and control out of a mind. So, there's all sorts of stuff. Like the Pentagon Papers is all about the Gulf of Tonkin, how we've, essentially the government faked. I'm pretty sure this is what it was, is that the government faked like a bombing or an attack on a ship to get us into the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously others that have turned out to be real, or at least real among the majority.
Yes.
So the conspiracy theory is it's still a theory, not yet proven.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And the idea of what we've dove into head first with this is the people that believe beyond a theory, that they're like, no, this is happening, and we're in the theory phase because we're like, yeah, but do we really know? But a lot of these people that we're reading and watching and listening to are like dedicated their lives to this is actually happening.
They believe they have evidence that it is or has happened.
That is strong enough and damning enough.
But you don't have the word I apparently
corroboration.
Corroboration. There you go. Corroboration. I think it's corroboration. You decide.
This could go either way.
To back it up enough to convince enough people or to actually show where the evidence came from. Because, all right, so we both read a book called Behold the Pale Horse, or Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. Mm-hmm. He claims to be ex-Navy intelligence, and he decided to turn against the government when according to him, JFK was shot by a Secret Service agent that was driving him. And when he discovered that, he decided to turn against the government and expose everything that he believes that he knew. There isn't a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of solid evidence besides anecdotal or, well, this guy said that. Or, like a letter and other stuff that claim, other people that claim to be witnesses that he has then obtained the information from. But, you decide. Like I said, I consider myself to be a skeptic. Not that I say a lot of this is impossible. Some things I find more or less likely than others.
Well, I'll give William Cooper credit because at least throughout the book and even at the end, he even says, hey, I could be wrong. This could be completely incorrect.
I do not remember him saying that
he
at all.
says it a couple times in the book. Yeah, there's especially even at the end, I think he's like wraps up in certain part of one of the last chapters before it gets into all the crazy papers where he's trying to connect, CIA.
Well, he gives his appendices and all his evidence.
Where he got his evidence from,
newspaper articles.
Yeah.
But he doesn't tell you what newspaper they came from, which it's stuff like that for me that reduces the credibility. And then there's this like some, albeit minor errors, but I feel like significant enough if you were trying to create, if you were so dedicated to the information, then you wouldn't have had these errors.
Yeah, but okay, I'll give him a little credit. He's fucking paranoid as hell.
Yeah, that's true.
He is scatterbrained because he's so like angered. He's upset. He's not clear-minded. But I feel like for you to really understand what they're coming from, I can't help but like you have to get angry a little bit. The first place you really got to start is get a little angry that we are being taken advantage of.
I would say that it's the emotion that allows you to be distracted, though, right? If what I'm saying,
or is it your fuel to dive into this? To really and have the courage to spit out the information. That takes a lot of guts.
So you're saying we got a lot of guts for doing this show, though?
Yeah. We're going to be ostracized by our peers after this.
I would just disagree. Because I think if you dive into it with too much emotion, then you're not clear-headed.
True. I'm definitely not taking... But again, yes, you're right.
And he tries to get you emotional. Yes. Right? So the emotion is part of what can take you down that rabbit hole. Because you're like, this is fucked up.
Yeah,
but you don't take the time to look it up or look into it necessarily. Like I looked into it, he quotes a bunch of laws. Mm-hmm. One of them that I highlighted, like I looked it up and it's really out of context. It could be what he's saying, but it could not be. It was the whole one about the drug law in the 80s and then his comment about how there's something in there about tree spiking. And it's like, why is there stuff about tree spiking in a drug law? Well, if you actually go and read the law, there's a bunch of information in there. Mm-hmm. And it specifically talks about that a lot of the issues that people are growing marijuana illegally on public land. And one of the ways they disrupt finding that is tree spiking. Mm. And so some of the penalties in the law are for like property damage or hurting people. And they specifically list tree spiking as a way to cause damage or hurt people. So it's not necessarily like, it could be, they're trying to go after environmentalists, but I couldn't really tell what Cooper's stance on the environment really was. I
know, it was very difficult to tell.
It was a little all over the place, but...
and to give a little context to this book, I'm trying to defend this man for whatever reason.
That's fine. We need to have both sides.
Yeah, we do. I'm on that side apparently. I didn't mean to pick it, but that's where I am. But I'll give a little defense and some context. This book was published in 1990, right? Now...
Or 91, right?
90 or 91, either way, a long time ago. And then a lot of the information is based on things that like either very recently happened to that date or dating all the way back to, he goes,
a lot of it's from his time in the military.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the late 1940s and going into the 50s.
Yeah, like that, because that's a lot of the alien stuff is the 50s.
Yes. So so just to give context on where he's coming from before you could just go on Google and research the law. The guy was probably reading real bills.
Well, this wasn't. I didn't just go to Google. I went to the actual U.S. government page where it has the law,
where it could be controlled by the secret government.
Where you can look up the actual laws as they're written.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the sections he quoted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is that what this is going to be the whole time?
No, I'm just kidding. We definitely need a third party for the.
I mean, we got both sides here, which
I know,
is good.
That's good. I know.
So it seems to be a lot of what comes up, a lot of what conspiracy theories, I believe, or what I've come to realize at least, is that they are very much tied to secret societies and the New World Order.
Yes, and that's
and the Illuminati,
yes.
right? So a lot of the main secret society stuff is the Illuminati, which doesn't have any defined place, right? Like it's not like, because the other ones are like the Freemasons, which there's a lot of conspiracy around the Freemasons, and then the Bilderberg group.
I think I had them all listed somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like the Freemasons and the Bilderberg group are the two main like legitimate or actual organizations.
Yeah, and they go into Knights Templar.
Oh, the Knights Templar, yeah.
Majestic 12.
He pretty much really, it's pretty much
Commission.
all, and then he also pretty much talks about all like fraternities, not necessarily like frats in college, but all of these fraternities that people join, Knights of Columbus, Knights Templar, all these different organizations that, I mean, I don't know if he mentions the Scottish Rite, but essentially, but it's essentially all of that, right? Like these fraternities that people join that have rituals. And so, I mean, I know a few Freemasons, and they find a lot of this laughable.
Yeah.
But according to him, that's just because they're not in the know. But they're like, the whole ritual aspect is just to have you go through the same thing, right?
To keep that sense of community and oneness, and
you guys all do the same thing. You guys all go through the same thing, so that way it connects you a bit.
Well, but really, where it all starts, it starts in the book like that. But even prior to that is going into like starting about religion, and only because I feel like they use religion to mask a lot of the.
Well, so the religious aspect too is the part that really got me on him as well. So because he talks about early, like he's a big he believes in Jesus and and the God of Jesus, and he believes in our Constitution, right? Freemasons, according to him, worship the devil because they worship knowledge and free thought. But then he also talks about how you need to get the knowledge of what has happened here and think freely to open your mind to what's going on. So it's a bit of a contradiction, I feel like, is that he basically says the pursuit of knowledge is evil.
Yes, because it's.
But then you need to pursue this knowledge, or we're all doomed.
Or we're all doomed, and we'll die, and we'll be slaves for the rest of our lives.
So it's
I did find that funny because I was like, wait a minute.
He has a fair amount of contradictions in the book. He contradicts himself a lot. I mean, that contradiction pops up a bunch of times.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he was constantly like writing this and looking over his shoulder because someone was going to get him. Right. I mean, he did predict his own death.
But then did he end up being somewhat the cause of it? So sometimes it's like, did it become a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Probably.
Right?
That's why anytime people usually try to start planning out their death, surprisingly, it happens that way because you were planning it, even though it's just more like subconscious, probably. But he did like I was telling you. He did predict a few things somewhat accurately, somewhat. We'll get
to those predictions. I think let's keep talking about secret society because we're not just talking about his book, right?
No, I know there's secret societies in general.
We're talking about just conspiracies in general, right? Because I also started reading a book called Children of the Matrix, which is about how we're ruled by reptilian shapeshifters. I just started it though, so I haven't gotten too far, but it pretty much starts out very similar as the other one, that we are ruled by a secret group of Illuminati that is set on controlling the population. I mean, so what are your thoughts on that? Do you think there is some secret organization that is manipulating us every day?
Why not? Well, okay, a couple things with that. Like, I know that has to do with. I know he talks about it a little bit in the book, but I remember I watched the History Channel had something on the lizard people they did a whole episode on the lizard people, and then they're tied to Illuminati and the New World Order as well.
Well, yeah, they are. According to David Icke, he wrote the Children of the Matrix. That is who the Illuminati really is,
right? And I even watched what show? It was a show I was watching where dang, I didn't write it down. I was so like involved in it. where the guy basically goes and tests out people's theories, and they were talking about the guide stones that used to be in Georgia and Elder. Wait for it. I know I wrote it down here somewhere. Give me a second. It was like
Don't worry, we can always just edit out your long pause.
I know. I'm sorry. I told you I'm like all over the place. That's the old.
That seems to me how the whole conspiracy theory seems.
Yeah, I can. No,
going.
I get it. I give him some credit because I feel like he was all over the place. I know I wrote it down somewhere.
He was consistent about the secret society New World Order. That.
Dang it! What was about the guide stones that were established back in by R.C. Oh, here it is. R.C. Christian, the Georgia guide stones. Have you heard about that? Did you look into this? They were the ones that were built that in 1980. Someone like just they're like they look like
like
monoliths?
Stonehenge.
Stonehenge. I think I could spit it out. Yes, they look like the Stonehenge, and they have 10 commandments of the Antichrist, and they were around from 1980 in Georgia to 2022, where last year in July somebody planted an explosive and it blew it up, and then they had to tear it down. But it was in like 8 different languages of these 10 commandments. It was really creepy. But one of the biggest ones was talking about keeping the population under 500 million on the planet. And anything that exceeds that, that's where we're not doing it right. So they're directly tying that to either Illuminati, New World Order, but they don't know who. They said the author was an R.C. Christian, but they never really figured out who that was. And yeah, it was really creepy. But I just made me think of that because it's very much tied to that what they thought was tied to the Illuminati, the lizard people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, personally, when it comes to devil worship or Satanism, it's not. I don't think it's. I personally don't believe in evil per se, and then the whole like worship of Satan is not necessarily what it's seen as, like sacrifice and all this like super dark stuff. Like I'm trying to remember if it's the Church of Satan or I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's a guy. And it's active right now, and it's pretty wide. It's like basically like an atheist church, and they have I should have looked it up, but I didn't even really think about it till now. They have like their own list of rules, and it's all about being kind to each other and all this different stuff. And then there's Satanism sometimes is about just living for yourself. It's not necessarily anti-Christian. It is sometimes the guy that started this church. He was like, it's more about trolling Christians than it is necessarily about.
Well, Christians troll everyone else.
And Satan was the ultimate troll, and so that's where they kind of came from. But because a lot of this, a lot of the New World Order stuff is very much about like, and especially for Cooper, was that that they are evil. They worship Satan. They worship Lucifer, and that's where all this evil stuff comes from. But the population control thing was very much what they were talking about. There was definitely some interesting stuff because there was the one thing I found most interesting about the population control.
Oh, here I found the Georgia Guidestone thing. I knew I had it somewhere. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's all right. Was there? I didn't have an actual chance to look it up, but it was whatever. So supposedly some government official talking about the need for population control and that how we started a civil war and we ended up starting a civil war in El Salvador or Ecuador because I
think it was El Salvador because weren't they trying to do that because of the oil that they have there, the natural resource of oil? I want to say it was El Salvador.
The way they explained it was more of an experiment to see if the passive forms of population control would work, like birth control, abortion. Because that's what Cooper talks about is the reason for women's liberation was encouraged for population control. This is another one of his contradictions, though, too, that really cracked me up. is that he was talking about how homosexuality is bad, and that they were encouraging homosexuality to reduce population, but then they released the AIDS virus or HIV virus
through the hepatitis C
right,
vaccines.
but on the homosexual communities. But if they're encouraging homosexuality to reduce the population because they don't breed,
and then they kill off the people that are not breeding anyway.
Right. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, you know. But anyway, that's just another one of the contradictions in there that I found kind of funny, I guess, is, you know, how do you need to look at it from what you're really saying here. If it's really about population control, then if that's assuming you believe homosexuality is a choice, I do not personally. You would be promoting homosexuality more broadly, though, if you were worried about population. I think it's interesting, the whole population control remark, though, is that population growth tends to slow as economic conditions improve. So to me, that's what, to me, a lot of the New World Order Illuminati stuff doesn't seem to have the goal that a lot of the conspiracy theory people think it does, because things generally worldwide have gotten better over time. You know, you can obviously think of different things, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that feel like their lives were better decades ago than they are now.
Make America great again.
Well, you can't take things on an individual level, but on a broad level, poverty has been reduced pretty much year over year across the world.
But wait a minute. But isn't there also,
and that's due to the one world government, right? That's due to the efforts of all of these groups that he talks against, like the Bilderberg Group, the UN.
True, but at the same time, you're watching the rich get the 1% of the population has 40% of the money in the world, which means
no, I don't disagree.
And that means people are getting very, very poor, where there's people with way too much money, and a lot of the, what do they go off of, the GDP that's supposed to be like,
gross domestic product.
Yeah, the GDP is supposed to show, as the GDP goes up, that means lifestyle is getting better.
Well, it's only one marker, right? You can't judge any situation off of one marker, right? And it's just like the unemployment numbers, right? That's only people looking for work. Sometimes people give up.
Oh yeah.
You know, people remain unemployed because they found
social systems that allow them to do that, which
I disagree. I disagree on the social system argument, just because I think most people I know that have used social programs use them to get out of them.
Well, yeah, but that's because you have a circle of people that aren't sucking off the teat of the government and that money for a long time. That's a whole other subject. But anyway.
We all suck off the teat of the government by existing in society. But anyway, I forgot where I was originally going.
That generally life has gotten better overall.
So generally life has gotten better. You know, fewer people live in poverty. People aren't necessarily getting poorer, but they're getting poorer in relativity to the overall growth.
I love how you're so positive about all this when you're normally on the other side.
Because I think there is a realistic solution to a lot of this that gets lost in all these kind of more, let's say, esoteric arguments.
Well, hold on a second. But you also got to look. I mean, hold on.
Just real quick. So the solution, because if you compare, because you're mainly talking about the U.S., right? Because that's our experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the U.S. has the weakest labor protections, the lowest union membership of any developed nation.
We're in serious debt with our own Federal Reserve, which is
but that's a whole other thing. And not necessarily relevant to this point. That if we want the situation in the U.S. to be better for the 99% or however you want to look at the numbers, then I personally believe that you protect the labor market. You increase union involvement. You protect the unions.
Yes.
You have strong labor laws. Like you look at, I think it's Sweden has very low business regulation, but they have very strong labor protection. So does Germany too, right? Like a lot of those countries have very strong labor protections, and not necessarily I don't necessarily know about Germany and every country in Europe, but sometimes the business regulation can go down as long as the worker is ultimately protected. And I feel like phrasing like that says I'm it makes it sound like I'm pro-communism, which I'm not. But
That's right.
I have no problem with people
But
being
wait a minute. Then
rich.
okay, so what's keeping those stronger labor laws and protections in place here?
What's preventing them? Well, but if you're thinking about the Illuminati and the New World Order, that's supposed to be worldwide, right? And it doesn't. So they're not necessarily suppressing it because
It's
they're not
supposed to
suppressing
be
it
worldwide, but we haven't quite gotten where the whole
all this. The Bilderberg group has
Correct.
always been
yes,
in Europe.
Yes, that's true. That is true. They're
And
trying to bring
and he's
it all
also
together.
wrong about every time he describes the location is incorrect.
I know
Because he keeps saying the Hague. He says the Hague, Switzerland multiple times, which the Hague is in the Netherlands. And then the Bilderberg group was started by he's some sort of Dutch royalty from the Netherlands, and the meetings have taken place all over the world.
William didn't have Google, Nick.
Well, I'm just saying, like he talks about how much he knows. He knows all this information about this secret society that nobody could know, but somehow he knows, and we should just accept what he knows as being the truth, even though he's got literally nothing to back it up except for there's no actual evidence to back it up. The best thing he has is a letter found on a copier that was in some secondhand shop. And then he changes the dates that it was originally written on.
Or how, like, he's like, I'm going to go off of memory, and I'm going to name all these people really quick based on my memory from something I saw 30 years ago. You know?
I think the strongest stuff he has is the stuff about whittling away the rights of the U.S. citizen.
That's the part I was focusing on.
Happened after, with, what was it? With Reagan, the whole Iran-Contra thing, which is another real conspiracy.
Earlier than that.
But
Look at all the executive orders.
Well,
we were texting about that.
We got to talk about executive orders.
Yeah.
So executive orders, he says they're a law. They are 100% not law.
Right.
They are very much and they have, every single president has written them. They didn't start when martial law happened in the Civil War.
No.
Also, not the first time we had martial law, and they are basically that's how the president dictates how he wants his branch to be run. Right, and how they're supposed to execute the laws. So it's the president's interpretation of the laws Congress has passed, and how he wants it executed by his various departments, without necessarily directly engaging with those departments behind. And so it's actually a transparent way,
because they do categorize them. There's a historical and there's numbering system and records.
Technically, it's a transparent way that the president dictates how his departments are supposed to run, as opposed to talking to them behind closed doors.
But they still need public events that have to happen for a lot of those executive orders to even have a reason to exist. Which that's where a lot of the theory I think comes in about that there was a lot of things that were
it could be what they want to do.
Oh yeah,
I'm not saying I'm not saying all executive orders are good.
No.
Or necessarily, don't have nefarious intent behind them. But I'm just trying to clarify what they are.
Yeah,
they are not laws.
Yes, correct.
Only Congress makes laws in the U.S. Mm-hmm. They are interpretations of the law, and dictating how the executive branch is supposed to follow this interpretation of the law. They often get struck down, and they can easily be overwritten by the next president without any issue.
What was something I think
even Congress has a way to remove them within like a certain time period at the beginning of a presidency or something like that. There's something about regulations. I don't know enough. But executive orders are not the end all. They're not permanent by any means. The next president can erase write a new executive order that completely cancels the previous ones.
But the ones the presidents are on the same page because they're all part of the New World Order or the Illuminati.
Right, because you can't get in there if you're not part of the Illuminati, right? or a reptilian.
Then it would make sense that all the executive orders that happen all
like
are happening for the ultimate purpose of where it's trying to get to.
I'm not trying to.
You should be, because that's the whole point of why this.
Well, no, I'm not trying to say that their purpose is inherently good. They're just not laws.
Right.
And then he also talks about the national security directives, which are not transparent until they can become transparent.
They're basically taking away all of our civil liberties because there's some crisis that's happened, and where all of a sudden, like the whole the establishing of the NSA is like, I feel the pivotal executive orders. Back was in 1947.
I think it was called something different then.
It
But
was essentially still the
that's
NSA.
you've seen Enemy of the State, right?
Yes, but a long time ago.
So Will Smith, Gene Hackman,
Oh yeah.
and it's all about the NSA, and
need
it's
to
all
rewatch that.
before it's all, and you know who Edward Snowden is, right?
Yeah.
So he if for people that don't know him, he worked for the NSA, and he was a whistleblower, and he provided a bunch of evidence about how the NSA was spying on Americans and not spying just on foreigners, but that they were also spying on allied foreigners. And they had all this information, all these dossiers on all sorts of people, regular people. And yeah, so that's a conspiracy theory that it turned out to be real. What goes on in the Enemy of the State is almost exactly what Edward Snowden said was happening. And yeah, it's legit. I mean, my dad always called those people the spooks. So I think that's a very 60s word for
yes.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not like, I'm sure a lot of people are going to see me as a sheep and very pro-government. I just consider myself a skeptic. I'm skeptical of the government as well, but I don't think that you can. I also believe in our system as a whole, and that corruption will eventually be sussed out, which it often is.
I feel like it's all just a freaking like politicians
you have
just
to believe in
like
something,
politicians
right?
just need to go away. I feel like
But then we
politicians
don't have a government. That's anarchy.
No, I didn't say government go away. I said
How
politicians.
How do you have government without politicians?
I don't know. I think they just need to all go away.
At
They
least-
don't do anything. I like the idea of placing all of the faith in technology and science. That makes more sense. to me.
Well, but you still have to have. I personally believe the vote matters. I think Donald Trump really showed when he was elected that voting definitely matters and is legitimate.
Or is he also part of the Illuminati? That guy would totally be part of the Illuminati.
Everybody that believes in the Illuminati definitely had Hillary Clinton pegged as the
That's true.
the actual choice.
Yeah.
And much more of the people that believe are much more against Hillary Clinton and probably much more pro Donald Trump.
But what if the Illuminati let that happen to make
True.
people have the illusion that they have
I've
control
often
over
said
voting?
but I've often believed that the conspiracy itself is sometimes the conspiracy.
I can see that.
Meant to make us. I think the goal
meant to second guess everything.
meant to make us apathetic about our own government, so that we don't get as involved. Whether you think that's a foreign agent or a domestic.
I think we're probably just
domestic
going
attempt.
against ourselves, but
Right. It makes us apathetic. It makes us less, if we have less faith in our own systems. So then it just becomes more chaos, and then we're more manipulatable at that point. Obviously some conspiracies do come to be true, but I think a lot of the larger conspiracy theory existence is the purpose of making us not believe that our votes count, not believe that we can take part in our own system, and not even attempt to hold the people in power accountable. Because if you believe the Illuminati runs everything, then why even engage with the government at all, right? Because you have no control over it. You go out,
Yeah, what would happen if nobody voted? Nobody, not one person voted. What the fuck would happen?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting.
I really thought about that. I'm like, if everyone just decided to just not vote.
A lot of countries, they make it a
would happen?
legal requirement to vote.
Yeah, but
you're legally required to vote once you're of age.
Which here it is not.
And you can vote like nobody.
It would just be an interesting social experiment to prove how much control we really have, because do things just keep moving on because or does it really cause a stagnation where something would have to change, because clearly if nobody participates, then is the government even recognized at that point, and then what happens?
Right.
It's not necessarily pure anarchy, but I'm just saying.
People have no faith in the government. So there's so few people that have faith in the government that we already have pretty poor voter turnout. The last 2 elections, or maybe just the last one, it was better than it's been in a while. But we actually have pretty poor voter turnout because there is so much apathy and so much belief that you're just voting for two sides of the same coin, right?
And that's the
why
other
I think
argument.
Conspiracy theories are somewhat dangerous, because they make us apathetic towards the
But then
systems
why
we
is
do
there
actually
only
have input on.
Are we so?
And the government's mostly run by people that work in the government and not politicians.
I know, but part of the reason why not apathetic, but I'm angry about it is I'm like, okay, we're such a diverse country, right? We really are, and that's a beautiful thing. why are they giving us 2 fucking people to vote for at the end of all of it? That doesn't. I feel like that's just.
Well,
I feel like it's too much control on the government's
it's how
part
our voting
about.
system works.
I know, but I
That's
just
we
feel
end up with just 2 parties.
which again, there's it can't be that 50-50.
I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting.
Yeah,
which allows
like true popular voting.
Well, there's popular voting, and then there's ranked choice voting, which you could still have the electoral college with ranked choice voting, but I think I like it because it forces people to be more broad in their in who they campaign towards, and then you don't have to feel like you're throwing your vote away with an independent party. Because I like to vote. I like to vote independent
too, but I know. But then I'm made to feel probably what you're about to say, as if you're throwing away your vote. And I also think they should have caps on how much. I feel like everyone should have the exact same amount of money campaigning, and there's capped at that, and done. There should be a cap.
Right. It was So that's there is a cap, but the problem is that people can donate to PACs, which there is no cap on.
Which the PACs apparently
technically are not supposed to associate with the candidate, but obviously that's all BS.
Yeah.
Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert showed exactly how you can manipulate that whole system and the endless dollars. See, that's what.
This is where it keeps getting manipulated from that side.
But that's why I don't.
So it makes sense why people are so apathetic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it certainly makes sense why people are apathetic, more so now than they have been in the past, because money is where the power is.
Follow the money.
Right. Money's where the power is. That's why I think, as opposed to secret societies and New World Order, I think it's much more a Game of Thrones kind of style. That all the people in power want power, and some of them are working together, but there's probably much more groups, and they're obviously donating. They're obviously shoveling huge amounts of cash. I mean, the richest people in the U.S. put in so much money into these campaigns, which is another reason I don't think it's run by the Illuminati, right? Because if you have to be part of the Illuminati to be rich and powerful, then why would they need to put in so much of their own money?
Well, because they're told to. They're probably brainwashed. That's kind of the whole purpose of why you have money. It's not
but then why do they
hoard it? It's to use it for.
Why do they need all that? Why do they need all that money now when they didn't before to do the same kind of campaigns? If the whole system's completely bogus, then why does all this money need to be funneled into it for the whole purpose of winning?
Well, that's the system they set up.
But it's not originally, right? It hasn't always been that way. You haven't always been able to donate unlimited amounts of money into campaigns like that.
Well, maybe because back then you didn't have to.
No, it was Citizens United. It's very much Citizens United.
Well,
the Supreme Court changed the rules and allowed. They said that business. It's been within our lifetime.
Right. So, but think about also. Okay, go ahead.
Citizens United they basically said that businesses deserve free speech, and the free speech of business is money. And so businesses can donate unlimited amounts of money to campaigns because that is their free speech. While individuals are limited to, I believe, 25,000 or I think it's 25,000 for an individual. So then the rest goes through PACs or 501. What is it? A 501c3 or something is another way. So like so super PACs and PACs have to declare you can't donate to them anonymously. Mm-hmm. But most of them have a 501c3.
Have like a list of who's donating and how much.
Most of them have a 501c3. I think that's the number that's associated with them that you can donate to anonymously, and then that can then donate to the super PAC. Right. So then that's how they keep the money anonymous. But then businesses themselves are allowed to donate in unlimited fashion. So the rich people have their businesses. They can leave this money in their business and then transfer it to a campaign. And it's not always the biggest money man that wins.
But look at the timeline of things. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I've got a whole timeline about how these things are going down. I just think whenever that was passed, if it's in our lifetime, we don't know the exact date.
I'm pretty sure. I have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's been within our lifetime.
But think about, one, you're right. There's just more money in the world. Most economies are doing better. Two, there's more information out there.
Yeah.
So like probably prior to that being the case, you probably didn't need as much money to manipulate and influence overall people. Where now it takes more money,
but it
to influence more people.
Right, but if you, like you said, if we put limits on how much money that any business, any individual any one organization can contribute to campaign, and then
They'll go back to good old manipulating
and,
styles,
and we'll
like
get rid of the
gaslighting and
501c, right? So
just
that
straight
all
up
donations for a political purpose have to be
maxed out at
traceable back to the original donor. So like
Yeah.
even a super PAC can essentially raise unlimited funds because they're not connected to a specific campaign. Supposedly,
but they really are.
right. But you would at least know who's giving all the money.
Yeah. And
right.
Then you can trace back who the heck's
trying to influence
in
this
the
thing,
Illuminati,
right?
trying to influence the system.
Right. Well, that's like George Soros.
It wouldn't
has been a
surprise
long
me that
boogeyman.
these rich people want to be a part of some fucking exclusive club.
Well, I think the whole thing is
bloodlines going back generations. It doesn't surprise me that
I
that
just
would be
think
the
that
case.
rich people, when they become super rich, they think that they're rich because they know more than others, and then money is also power. Power corrupts, and they just think they're smarter than everybody else. So they think that they know how the world should work, and so they're going to use all their influence to make sure it doesn't matter about consensus. It doesn't matter what kind of information you're given. I know better than you, so I'm going to influence this to get this person elected. But it doesn't have to necessarily be an Illuminati. I think the same things are happening, that there is all this manipulation. There are people that think the population needs to be controlled. There is this and that. But there's not necessarily one organization running it all. That's how I look at it. There isn't the Illuminati as a singular entity is why I don't believe that it exists. I think that's why I said it's more Game of Thrones.
Maybe it once did, but think about it this way. Like he does point that out in the book at some point when he talks about the subgroups. Like there's like these very, very few people in the know, and they brainwash or do their little, initiation ceremonies. And they're encouraged to create subgroups and subgroups and subgroups and subgroups and subgroups. So suddenly it's so broad that really these guys all on the outside and all their subgroups know they're a part of something. But the reality is they're not really directly connected. But there's an overarching goal of what they all believe in.
I just don't. There's too much back and forth. There's too much back and forth in what happens. Within the government and within the interpretation of our laws and the enforcement of our laws. That's why I just don't think you can't put it as a singular group trying to influence everything. There's all these different parties trying to get ahead.
Yeah, but that's the whole
fighting
point.
it out. That's why I'm saying it's more
Illuminati-ish,
more Game of Thrones-ish than New World Order Illuminati. I mean, like me personally, though, I'm not fully against a one world government, and I don't think a one world government means the destruction of the U.S. Constitution. I mean, I don't think that.
I just think the problem is everything's for profit. It's all about profit.
Well, yeah, it is all about money. That's what I'm saying. It's not as much about control as it is about money and power, right? And it's about trying to manipulate the people and find your way to get to that power. Because the Illuminati assumes that these people are already in power. So the way I think of it is that a lot of this manipulation, a lot of these various ideas that he goes through and that all the conspiracies go through, is not every group believes in all of them, and there are different people trying to win.
I mean, your Game of Thrones thing sounds right. I mean, if you look at everybody wants power, right? Everyone wants power.
Well, I wouldn't say everyone, but everybody
that's playing the game in these higher ranking,
right? And they're willing to use the peons to fight their battles,
right? And they all probably have a common understanding that there's a lot more of us than there are of them,
right? I mean, look what happened to the French,
right? So you got to look at how do you keep all these people under control that really, if everybody actually got together and went, hey, they're trying to fuck us.
They're not doing a great job right now.
I'm just saying, if we did,
right,
we can overcome these elite, right? And their whole game of controlling and profiteering, right? So therefore, that's why the quote I was telling you about kind of makes a lot of sense. And I just think the best way to control the masses, which is, again, at any point, if we all really just got together and just knew we wanted to have one common goal of achieving something, even if it was what you're talking about with the labor thing, even if it was that, we could do it. we could probably do it in probably 10 days or less if we just got our shit together. But the
yeah, go.
point is, they can't. What they do is they keep us divided. They keep us feeling all like we're separated individual, and crisis after crisis after crisis. And there's jokes about and memes and things that float around the social media, like just in our lifetime, how many things that have happened. Like that's why you look.
Well,
Like,
maybe,
look at
hold
hold
on,
on.
but like, I mean, you're talking about
Crises.
crisis after crisis. I mean, but there's like, are you talking about like natural disasters?
No, we're talking about going back. I went back to 1992. If you're still with us, don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah.
Looking at in our lifetime, I could have went back to the 80s, but I was like, all right.
Well, define crisis as you're trying to explain.
Things that were, I truly feel, initiated by these elite in some form. Illuminati, New World, whatever you want to call it, Game of Thrones, that these things were put into action on purpose. Thinking about like the NSA, how that was created, and they did that. I'm just going to go back and move through it as quick as I can, but like my theory on this is like they created the NSA because supposedly, you know, the whole alien thing that they were with the Roswell, that was an excuse for why they created the NSA to spy on aliens, even though since that day they've had zero any type of correspondence, communication, surveillance of aliens, and tons of Americans.
Not according to Cooper.
No, but no, this is even through other sources, right? And then, of course, they created FEMA, right? Which for all the natural disasters, which really is just another form of being able to overcome, like martial law, essentially, right?
FEMA was originally created to basically create a way to protect the government to allow continuity of government in the event of some extreme crisis.
Yes, yes. Now, then you start looking at the things that started happening. Now, there were things in the 80s I didn't get into, but like, okay, in our lifetime that we can remember, 92, the Oklahoma City bombing. That was something that people believe was initiated to some degree by influences other than this one sole guy that made a bomb in a farm. The LA riots. The first World Trade Center bombing in 93, which didn't work out as well. Basically, if you look at all these things, like not enough people were killed for executive orders to come about and any laws to change. The Columbine shooting, that was, in 99. And then we had 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, enough people died, enough people died that within, I think it was, a month or two later, they hastily came up with the Patriot Act. And they roped in both the NSA and FEMA into the Patriot Act, right? These previous government executive orders are now part of this, and their roles shifted from there. And then we had the Iraq War on terror, right? Another crisis. We had Hurricane Katrina, which proved FEMA was a fucking sham because of the big thing that they couldn't respond. They didn't do anything right.
It didn't prove that FEMA was a sham. It just shows that it was very poorly run.
Right, which means, was it really ever designed for an actual disaster?
It wasn't, though. We already went over that. It was originally designed for building bunkers for the protection of government officials. And so there was never a clear path to it managing disasters for the masses.
Yeah, I guess.
So
fair.
That's why it failed, is it never had a clear directive and planning to how to deal with those. Or is that what they just want us to know or believe, right? Then there was the 2008 Great Recession. The housing market that could have been prevented, but they just let that shit ride. The Boston Marathon bombing was another one in 2013. We had Trump, then the pandemic. And my belief is next that they're going to bring back this whole alien thing, because if you want to talk about a one world government, how, and we talked about this before this episode, how else would you get the entire world all up in arms together other than the whole world being attacked by aliens? And it's creating that you would
terror.
You would need an actual alien invasion to make that happen.
That's what I'm saying.
Not a pretend one.
I know, but I'm just saying, could
but I mean,
but again, but you see how there's
to believe
there's been some perpetual crises that really all of them.
So you don't think there's people in the world beyond just the elites that are interested in causing chaos? Because I guarantee there are. There's psychopaths.
But who gives them the money, the resources, the plans? I would say, and because
But
all
most
of
of the
these
most
are
of things
pinning.
but most of those things are pulled off with very little funds.
9/11 needed more funds than that, and you know they never
Yeah, but
arrested. They never arrested any hijackers. All those
well, they all
people.
died
No, a
in the
lot.
planes.
No, a ton of them are still
No,
living.
that's all bullshit, man. That's all proven to be bullshit. That that was some stupid picture that was floating around the internet and was proven to be false. Just like there's a picture floating around about the what is it? Was it the Columbia space shuttle that blew up?
Mm-hmm.
There was a picture floating around. Oh, they're all still alive. No, those were just people, different people that were found that looked somewhat similar.
Fair, fine,
Put in the
all right,
picture.
they're dead too.
So I mean,
but the point is,
I'm not saying that there's no conspiracies, but to think that anything bad that happens is only because of some sort of elite manipulator organization, I think is too much faith in humanity in general. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Timothy McVeigh, through his experience reading about a bunch of conspiracies, got the idea that the government was up to no good and decided to bomb a building.
But like, why that one?
Because it's
those people. Why not a government building?
It was a federal building.
But there was a lot of innocent people that lived there. He wasn't even attacked. That's the thing. I just feel like if they truly wanted to attack specific people that were pissing him off, there's.
Well, I don't know what his connection to the I don't know what his connection to the building was. He may have never really said, you know. But there's a good reason that a bunch of Muslims might be pissed off at the U.S. though.
Fair.
You know, there's a very good reason. I mean,
But then why was the war
disrupted
of games,
that whole region?
But the war on game, you know how the whole thing was happening that both
the war
happened.
on terror.
The war games. Basically, they've showed how 9/11 on that same day, just like later in London in 2005, how they were showing that the reason the NORAD never caught what was happening with the planes or the bombing that happened over in the UK.
Because the government's ultimately incompetent.
Because they said they happened to just have war games with the exact same scenarios planned out on that day, and then the real thing happened.
Didn't know that the war games were happening.
That's what I'm saying. But how would they find out that exact scenarios? Like, well, I feel like that's
and you could make the argument too, because the Bin Laden has connections. I mean, he got all his money.
Bin Laden connections are directly connected to the Bush family, going way back.
His connection, his family had money, and so that's where he could have gotten the money from. Yeah. And there was some information that wasn't released for a long time, but then was released about potential Saudi connections. Like I said, I'm not saying that there's no manipulation going on, but I'm not saying you can definitively say that is how these things happened, because it's certainly possible that there's coordinated efforts to disrupt society. I mean, especially coming from the Middle East. I mean, and the whole general Arab world, because we've been very much there, very much trying to dictate.
Yeah, because
systems work.
Guess what the government wants control of?
Oil.
Yes,
money.
Again, going back to money, like which is why.
That doesn't mean it's secret. I mean, this is out in the open.
But this is Game of Thrones style shit too. I'm just saying. But they're playing this long ass game, and it's going on generations and family and people connected. Like, how else do you keep those things going for so long?
Well, because you see,
without there being some form of some bond that's keeping this
well,
goal
yeah, I mean,
obviously
you need connections to make it places that it becomes dynastic, right? Like, I'm just saying that doesn't mean that there's some secretive society. I think it's much more out in the open.
Well,
that's why we end up getting manipulated by even conspiracy theories. Is so that we're not paying attention to what's actually really in front of us, that is in plain sight. Because isn't the saying? It's much easier to hide in plain sight, right? I don't believe there's an Illuminati, because I believe what's happening is just rich people trying to stay rich and finding other ways to be super rich because they're fucking greedy.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe it had to be an Illuminati again, just for a very long time, because you're right. Back then, you had to hide things, but it was easier to hide. And that's how people got things done.
See, so if you look at if you look at older European times, it was both. You could make the argument it was Illuminati, but it was still more Game of Thrones, right? They're all related, but then they're all still fighting with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's I don't believe the Illuminati could exist because no group of people at that level would be content with being equal with anybody else.
True. I mean,
You know,
if you look at what was it? The Dan, what was the guy that wrote the Da Vinci Code?
is it Dan Brown?
Dan Brown
I don't
versus.
know.
I'm just saying, if you look at the Da Vinci Code movies and Game of Thrones definitely did better overall with the popular people. Yeah,
The books are. I'm sure I haven't read either books, but
I haven't either.
I'm sure the books are way better, and then obviously the show is way more enjoyable than the Da Vinci Code movie. But anyway, so I think it's much more like. So I was talking about I heard this theory about the Ukraine war with Russia,
mm-hmm.
and that the real reason that Putin invaded Ukraine is because he had a couple test cases when he invaded Georgia, and then when he took Crimea, and nothing really happened, right? And so then he did a larger scale invasion into Ukraine, and because he thought that we would then do something with a larger scale like that, right? And that because we sanctioned all of his gas, but not everybody's on our side, right? So now the price of gas, natural gas, has exploded, right? And Putin is a kleptocrat, right? So he steals all the money from his country.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started this war to raise the price of natural gas so that he could pocket, him and the other oligarchs in Russia could pocket more money. Because I would much more believe we live in like an oligarchy as opposed to some secretive Illuminati. Do you know what so like
oligarchy? That go ahead.
It's we're run by rich people.
Yes.
It's the people that control business or control the money.
Well, there's also the theory of the corporatocracy.
Right. Yeah. Which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
Which somewhat ties into the Illuminati theories, especially when it comes to the Federal Reserve, and then you have like the Morgans, the Rockefellers, and the Rothschilds, and a lot of what that comes to, because they were oligarchs for sure, or robber barons is what they used to be called, and that's where we're headed. I think we're headed back to that era, and that's why we've had so much economic trouble, is that we have people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. There's people outside of the U.S. as well that I just don't know their names that are super fucking rich, and they're doing what they can to then stay rich, and they're very much trying to crush the labor class. And that's it goes back to why I say we need labor protections and unions, because that's how we fight against the elite. That's how we get power, is by having that connection through labor, because that's how we earn.
It's true. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that's why watching the Zeitgeist documentaries and watching all, because I'm just like, okay, if that's the way of things, gosh, eventually there's just going to be nobody to buy things or make things anymore with the rate they're fucking going. Right, I'm like, so what the fuck is the point of that?
Right, and it's just that's why, like, when I think like people are like Elon Musk gives a shit about the environment. They're like, if that dude gave a shit about the environment, he could literally give up 90% of his wealth, still be a super fucking rich billionaire, and actually invest in companies that were trying to help the environment, as opposed to just enriching himself. Which is that, I mean, he saw the market for the electric car. In my view, he basically stole Tesla out from under the original creators, in my view.
And then he fucking bought Twitter. That's great for the environment.
Well, yeah, I think that was tweets gone wrong for him. But it's also about control, right? He says he's a free speech absolutionist, but immediately he started not allowing people to say certain things, especially about him.
And then he called the fucking Twitter X now, which I'm really annoyed about. I'm like, that's what it tells me. Like on Family Feud.
Yeah,
don't fucking use that app anymore.
I think that it was either just his bravado getting the best of him, or a direct goal of manipulating the narrative.
Well, yeah, that's what always ends up.
I don't know why Twitter has become the source of our information, that's one thing. This is off topic. Something that really pisses me off is watching the news and then they start quoting tweets. Who gives two shits about what
That's not
any
fucking
person
news.
has
That
ever said on Twitter ever.
That used to be something they did on like E-Entertainment,
Right.
you know,
Like bullshit.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know, or Ridiculous or all those shows, and now the fucking this is, so that you know, it's just my whole thought of it is why a lot of the things that probably need to get done won't get done is because these rich people, Game of Thrones style, if we're going to go that route, which is fine. The point is there's people playing the game and they're manipulating us through crises. I think that makes the most sense. If there's a crisis on terror, then the war industries are going to profit. If there's a crisis on resources, then you know that keeps us under control because now we got to pay more for fucking groceries.
So do you not think there would be any organically occurring crises though, that any of these, do you not believe any of these crises could have happened essentially on, that, some all the crises that you mentioned maybe of the believed origin as opposed to some grand manipulation, or because it could also just be the general manipulation as a whole then led to this, but even though those specific actions were not planned by the manipulators.
I think it's going both ways at the where I feel where we're at now with
we're manipulating ourselves into arguing about the points that don't matter.
What that and the fact that we're not doing a lot about it. There's not like a whole lot of people, again, going back to getting angry and educated enough and coming together and talking about it to make action to prevent these organically natural, which they don't, nothing can be organic with that anymore. Well, maybe the global warming leading to the ice age, yes, but guess who fucking probably got that? We got that. We're Katrina, the ones ruining
I mean, was Katrina a grand scheme or was it a hurricane and incompetence?
No, it was again our fault because this is how nature is going to start to react because we're fucking up everything on this planet.
Well, even irrelevant to that, like the disaster that FEMA was for Katrina. Are you saying that could have only happened on purpose, or was it just general incompetence?
I think it was showing general incompetence because FEMA was really never designed for there was never there's
right,
never
it wasn't designed for that originally, so there was no plan to execute.
But they definitely painted the picture of FEMA as if it was like many Americans. That's what I'm saying. But the point was they painted the picture that that's the whole point of this establishment. And when something happened and they didn't act, why wouldn't everyone go, wait a minute, why the fuck do you exist again? Wait a minute, what did you say you guys were? Back up. Somebody needs to be held accountable for not helping these people when this is something that you were painting this picture, whether that's what's written in here or not, right? Whether it's written in what they were actually created, they painted the picture to the public, which ultimately the perspective of what we believe is gonna be the most important and override anything that's in writing.
So what would have what do you think would have happened if there wasn't FEMA though? Do you somehow think it would have been better without FEMA?
Thanks for sticking with us. Please like and subscribe. Now back to the show.
I mean, I don't know.
If there was no government organization tasked with dealing with a natural disaster, then what happens to all these people that have had their lives completely ruined? I mean, look at what's happening in Maui right now.
I know.
So I'm not saying that it's being done well.
I know,
but at least there is an attempt.
I know. I agree.
Yeah.
But then, if we know natural disasters because of what we're doing to this planet are probably going to become more and more and more and more of a reality, then why aren't we using all of the money instead of for fucking this fake war there just to get oil?
Because there's a lot of people that deny that it's happening, so then you can't get all the money to go. You can't get the money to go there because there's too many people that think it's a hoax.
This is why I don't believe in federal taxes.
They vote for people that don't. They vote for people that won't support the issues.
I know, and again, this is why politicians need to be abolished.
The politicians don't need to be abolished. We need to be voting for our own interests and stop voting on culture war issues.
Yes. I just don't like the fact that we are so trusting, which we shouldn't really be anymore, that the money they take from us, we don't really ever see where it goes. Where yet the government demands of us, we want to know exactly what the fuck you're doing with your money. We
Right.
want to know every year. You got to report it. Blah blah blah. I feel like no. I feel like and again, I'll pay taxes. I just bitch about it. But but I think the point is, I'm like, well, if you're going to demand me, the citizen, to really let you know where all the money's going, how it's coming in, where it's going out, da da da. I want to see what the fuck you're doing with the money you take from me, and I want much more of a direct say. Why would it be so
Okay,
bad to have more of a
but see,
direct
so
say
but
of
this
where
is-
our money goes?
But I'll tell you why we don't have that. It's because of the fears of regulation, right? So we would need people in the government to then follow all that money. So money never leaves. I can't remember how the exact quote is, but it's like money doesn't leave the government. It only leaves the government from a leaky bucket, right? So look at like the COVID response. Like a huge fraction of that was basically stolen, right? By people who didn't actually need it. So we need better enforcement.
Yeah, because they had no idea what
but
they were doing.
But the
during
enforcement itself costs money.
Yeah.
Right. And so like taxing the rich, right? They just they passed a law increasing the IRS by 80,000 individuals for the stated purpose of going after rich people that are avoiding taxes. But then they came back, the new Congress comes in and essentially gets rid of that part. Or I can't remember, or maybe they wouldn't allow it to be voted through. They removed that from the law. I can't remember exactly how it played out. But it was there, and then it was taken away. Right? So we need to be willing to regulate ourselves and to pay for it, because those things do cost money too. Right? So you do need to spend money to then regulate the money. Right? But people don't want to pay for the regulators. So then how do you follow the money if you don't pay for somebody to follow the money? I mean, you can't get money out of tax cheats if you don't have IRS agents to go after them.
True.
Right? And because, I mean, that's ultimately all the money in the U.S. is the people's money, because it doesn't really exist. Right? So it's all just created and it's all of ours. Right? So just like I think with the whole banking crisis, what should have happened is they should have just paid off people's mortgages. The banks would have still been saved.
Yeah.
And then people wouldn't have lost all their fucking houses. Right? The money should be there shouldn't, I don't,
but that's
business
not the way the economy works.
It could work that way.
But
it's not about the economy. That's how we're manipulated through terms like socialism. Right? Because giving our money back to us is not socialism. Bailing out businesses and picking the winners and losers among business, that is socialism.
But that's
so
what they
bailing
promote.
out the airlines, and it's also the people that promote it the most tend to be the people that speak the loudest against things like socialism. Most people don't really understand what socialism is.
Yeah, because they've been told one thing and then they stuck with that, and they won't
it's
change
been
their mind.
manipulated into the idea that welfare is socialism, but socialism is about the government controlling the means of production, and then so picking winners and losers among business, because we can't let all these people lose their jobs. We'll just pay them unemployment, and then that's going to be way cheaper than paying executive salaries.
And then
management salaries,
let the free market take over from there to employ people, and
that would create more competition.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and it's just like the FTC doesn't do their job because we don't fund them well enough.
Yeah,
and the FTC would be breaking up. Not because I'm a big Apple fan, but Apple should be broken up.
Yeah,
and that would allow for more innovation.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't it like the second AT&T broke up, like shortly thereafter, we had like all these advances in phone technology because AT&T had such a monopoly in it all. And their claim was it would stifle innovation. And that's what the claim is now too. But the reality is they wouldn't be able to crush their competition.
Yes,
like Bill Gates, he basically, and this is what Bezos does all the time, is they crush anybody that competes with them. So then it just becomes more consolidated. I think we should at least talk about the aliens.
Yes. Well, I love that we had an aliens episode, which makes it's just funny knowing about grabby aliens. We're going, none of that shit's true because we'd be able to see them. in big spheres of light. Like,
I would say
I've been like arguing with people. They're like, "There's aliens." I'm like, "There's no fucking aliens. We could see them if they were here. Don't you know how the speed of light works?"
It's 100% true, right? Because I mean, that's why I like the whole grabby aliens thing. Was I think the first thing that can and his I don't know if you watched more of the original
No,
Lex
because
Friedman podcast.
I've been in a fucking rabbit hole
But
for
so
conspiracy
we
theories.
talked about the panspermia theory and how so that was the one way I was like, all right, that's how aliens could actually be here, is if they were essentially of the same origin of life as us, but it just went to a different star. You know, when it was broken up. So the life started somewhere else and then was transported here. Or maybe it was, you know, transported from the place where the aliens are.
Like, that would be the only way that would make sense. But wouldn't we
according to the grabby aliens theory,
yes. But then
and
wouldn't
they chose not to be grabby.
still wouldn't that still be we'd be still be able to see them?
Well, but if they only exist on one star, then we just see the light of that star. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because they chose not to be grabby.
Yeah, that's
then
true.
we only see the light coming from the one
that's
location.
True.
But so
anyway, so we go back to the real aliens conspiracy
the alien,
theory.
So the whole alien conspiracy that Cooper talks about is that we did meet aliens in the 50s. Roswell and Area 51 is all about aliens. We have a treaty with the aliens that hasn't necessarily gone all that well, and we were given alien technology to then study. So like he did say he was not saying that any of the flying saucers that he saw were necessarily alien, but they were at least reverse engineered alien technology. And we have a secret alliance. And then, are you familiar with I'll probably mispronounce this name, Chaim Eshed? So this is a guy. He was the Israeli space security chief, and so he came out. I think this was still during the Trump administration. It may have been during the Biden, but I think it was still during Trump's. They basically said that we exist as part of a galactic organization. You know, that we have been visited by aliens. We're part of a galactic alliance, and that but the Earth just isn't ready for it yet. And that's why, and that Trump almost exposed it, but then was given a warning. But then it turned out he was writing a book, and he's probably doing that to sell his book.
Yeah.
Just like the whistleblower that claims to have heard something from people while he was in the intelligence community that we had, been visited and connected to aliens. Maybe, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's interesting that the vast majority, well, I guess that would make sense that they're mostly seen in the U.S. if the U.S. is the one that has the treaty.
True.
I don't know. I'm not a big believer that aliens have been here.
No, I'm since I'm going down the conspiracy theory route, because now later in the 90s, after he wrote that book, he retracted that. He said later that it was all a hoax. He was manipulated by the government to believe these things, and they wanted him to put out that information because it was going to spread the word that to start getting people to have the seed, like the Inception thing, that there are aliens, because eventually down the road they were going to use, like I was saying earlier, the whole alien thing, and they're going to fake a world alien invasion to be the excuse to have the new world order of one government that takes over. And the only way to get the entire world, just like, Independence Day, Armageddon, blah, 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 those movies kind of highlight what would happen, would be that everybody would band together. And we saw like a little smidget of what that's like during the pandemic. We probably all remember that.
I very much disagree on that. We did not band together as a world at all.
Not really band together, but I just felt like there was those moments of we didn't know what the fuck was going on, and everyone's quarantined at home, and we're like, well, all right, we're all gonna die together on this. We're all, like.
I think we came much more divided through the pandemic than together.
I felt like there was moments of, fuck it, these could be our last days, and everybody seemed to be
friendship
celebrating.
And misery.
Yes, throughout the world. And again, a very, very, very short term smidget. I feel like I saw it. It was very fleeting, but but it would make somewhat of sense why it would take a couple generations to start getting people to maybe believe that, to start having these kind of conversations, just because that way when it happens, if they orchestrate it right, then it's an excuse to get all these pieces into the place that they've been slowly putting together
So
to control them. Again,
what's ultimately
but what did
let's
they
be
get
the-
out
let's
of
be-
that?
let's-
I don't know.
Well, let's be the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
What's bad about having a one world government? Why is
Because
that
we'll
a
all
bad
just
thing?
be slaves. We'll just be working
Well,
to keep them happy
I
and
mean,
wealthy.
let's look at the EU, right? A lot of people would say that's not a great example, but still, it's still multiple democracies electing officials, right? They still have their own
Is that
countries.
really what the New World Order is?
I mean, but that's multiple countries becoming under one government, right?
But is that what are we saying it's a government or what is because they don't the New World Order I would not consider it a
Well, that's
a
but if
government.
you're taking it from a Illuminati point of view. I'm taking it from the idea of that we could have a one world government and it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing.
But
right?
I'm
So you
seeing
could-
it from they would just turn us all into slave labor to
But then,
serve for their
you always
purposes.
you said before too, though. There's a lot more of us than there are of them.
Eventually,
right? So
that would
the-
not work. But that's in their minds. They probably feel like they can continue to control us because there's something bigger than us.
But they've been
than-
controlling. So far though, they've been controlling us by reducing poverty and increasing technology. I don't know. I just don't buy the way the world has gone.
But
with the
technology has
Illuminati
also been
theory.
a major distraction to people. We're all very distracted.
Oh
now
yeah, like
'cause
social
there's-
media and all that. But we're still developing the technology.
I know it's still
Right?
in development. It
Yeah.
of what. But again,
Right. I don't
okay,
believe in the
well,
Illuminati, so it's just
I mean, I don't know if it's again. I don't even.
like I said, I believe there's manipulation going on. I just don't think it's all unified in its origin.
All I know is what would probably happen is if they had all got together and somehow faked an alien invasion, however that would fucking play out.
I don't think we would unite. I think that there would be some places that we would maybe like pseudo unite for a little bit until the invasion was gone. But if we weren't doing well, there'd be fucking sellouts for sure.
Right. Oh yeah.
And there'd be plenty of governments that would have no problem selling out to the aliens. And then, I mean, I think there's a lot of people, especially amongst the conspiracy community, that would prefer us to be living in a state of warlordship.
Which that's what it feels like New World Order would be.
But these are the people that are supposedly against the New World Order.
Mm.
There's people that want to start a civil war.
Well, if anything, the other way to look at if this is a possibility of this whole alien thing and it being a hoax and they're going to create it to be it could be a just another play on the chessboard of exposing people and how they react, even people with the money. Like if
Right.
you could use that as a
any scenario in the world is the result of the Illuminati and the New World Order, right? Because you can make anything fit.
Yeah, true.
But I think there's, like I said, I believe there is manipulation by the elite out there. I think that a lot of times they think they know better, and different ones of them are trying to make the world in their personal vision because they feel it will enrich them more. But I don't think that those visions are nearly as united that we'll ever get a real one world government type New World Order. I think that the New World Order, if it were to somewhat happen, it would be much more fragmented.
Well, that's what I was just thinking too. What if the New
It
World
wouldn't be
Order?
it wouldn't be a one world situation.
What if the New World Order was just it's almost again Game of Thrones like that whoever can get to that point is the New World Order and they get to call whatever shot it's going to be that best serves them. And they use tactics of fear and manipulation and crises to control the masses to go with whatever they say because they know better because of the position they've gotten themselves in.
I just think that gives them too much credit. Like just to be able to manipulate it so heavily. I just don't think they're that.
But this is how these people are. Look at Hitler. He was
unsuccessful.
I know. Again, well, ultimately those things tend to fail.
He wanted power too much.
Yes.
Right, and so I think that's ultimately the issue. Right, is that
how do you want power, but just enough?
Right.
I guess that's the game.
It gets
that
to
we're
you know
playing.
it's like why Rome fell.
I
right?
still don't understand who won Game of Thrones, by the way.
Nobody won.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, was it Tyrion won? 'Cause
Period.
He got
No,
to,
the guy in the wheelchair. Brand.
but wasn't it? Didn't,
Like the
didn't
guy in the
Tyrion-
wheel.
Didn't Tyrion become the essentially like the president?
Yeah, but but he was still under Bren.
Well, that's just because Bran saw all. He was like a psychic and he could see everything. So you might as well listen to that dude.
I know. I
You
guess
can see past, present, future at all times. I'm probably gonna listen. You know, like you already know what's gonna happen.
Would you call that science?
Tell me what to
based?
I mean, if it's legit,
I know.
but it's science, right? Like
Where's that guy at?
the
It's our
the
Bryn.
pursuit of truth. You know.
So I guess truth won in Game of Thrones,
Right.
and it was handicapped.
What I thought interesting about what I found
Sorry.
interesting about Game of
That's funny.
Thrones is it ended up being very much about the power corrupts, right? Because Daenerys had this vision. So it's very much, this is like why I think this is much more how it works, right? Is there's somebody who gains access to a lot of power, and they have this vision of I'm going to make everything better. So I don't think it's always through ill intent.
No, it usually isn't.
So I'm going to make the whole world
It's
better.
their
I'm going to
version
free all
of
these people.
better.
But then she became too powerful, and that power went to her head, and so she was out to destroy anybody that questioned it. Right? So she very much became I don't know if this is R.R. Martin's, if this was his plan, but she basically, I think she's an allegory for the concept of power and corruption and absolute power corrupting absolutely. Like that, I think she's kind of the epitome of that because she became, a bad person in the end.
Yeah,
like the
she
whole
did.
time,
No, I know.
she's this excellent person. She's
Just like
saving
Adolf
the
did, too.
slaves. She's I don't know how if he.
You
Well,
can't
well,
have
I guess-
conspiracy theories and not talk about Nazis a little bit, I mean, he talks about all the concentration camps that are set up throughout the United States.
Right,
that are ready for-
those are some good points about the prison system and the so like the militarization of the police. That's definitely been going on and increasing, and then the mass incarceration. I definitely am fully against forced mental health stays. I don't think that's
cruel and unusual punishment. Isn't that considered that?
Oh, I've been a victim of the system, and it was a total lie that sent me there. Because doctors are given the ultimate power and authority to just send people there without question.
That's fucked up. I
Yeah,
thought
it
that
is
was
fucked up.
considered cruel and unusual punishment. Isn't that why they're
Send
not
them
put?
to mental hospitals?
Isn't that why they're not
confinement? Solitary confinement's considered,
But
but not legitimately.
Isn't that the
Most
excuse
countries
of
do.
why they won't do anything with all the homeless on the streets that are whacked out of their mind, because it's considered cruel and unusual to force them into mental hospitals for them to get help that they freaking need so they don't hurt themselves or others? That's the excuse they're using.
I'm
at
like,
least
I
here.
would be.
Sorry, that's
I
more
mean,
local topic, but-
I'm for building them housing and telling them that they can't live on the street anymore.
Correct.
But I'm certainly against sending. I don't think that
You don't think the ones that are just
hospitalization is
doing drugs and yelling out and being all wacko shouldn't be maybe given some attention medically?
I think they
and-
should be given attention, but I don't think they should be forced into hospitalization.
But how would they know that they're being forced when they don't know what the fuck they're doing on the street either?
I'm fully against
I know
forced
you are.
hospitalization.
I know you are.
And so he talks about that kind of stuff. That that, like I said, the over militarization of the police and the mass incarceration. I just think, I don't know what necessarily the goals of all that would be. Maybe it is a grand scheme of control. I think personally, though, I think it's more about the creation of private prisons and just about making money.
Oh yeah, because that's just another form of making money.
Right.
Again,
it's just another, and then
people
you
doing
gain
bad
slave labor.
things-
You gain slave labor by having a prison,
People
right?
doing bad things is good for the economy,
Oh, it is. Look at
and it's not. And that's.
Nothing-
And I'm not even. I'm not. I think that's terrible.
the entire world has progressed through atrocity.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
How much could it have been prevented though? Like,
None of it.
you don't
We,
think
would-
so?
we I don't think we would have ever progressed as societies if it wasn't for the abuse of significant numbers of people.
It's fucked up.
It is fucked up, but that's the way of mankind.
I mean, it is. We
Otherwise-
can't change what's already
otherwise,
happened,
I mean,
so.
you can't. I mean, you can't complete these grand projects without huge numbers of people, right? So how do you make that happen on a scale you can afford unless you force people to do it? I mean, look how we get fed. That's borderline slave labor in some situations.
True.
With migrant workers not even making minimum wage, and they're hugely taken advantage of. I mean, it's not literally slave labor because they, make some money, but it's definitely an abuse of people. The U.S. railroads, a huge abuse of Chinese people. I mean, the entire the economic growth of the colonies, post establishment was in large part due to slave labor. I mean, slave labor has, it's unfortunate, but slave labor has moved society forward since the beginning of civilization. Slaves have always existed. They still exist today. But for the most part, it doesn't exist for the advancement of progress. I don't know if that was necessarily the goal at the time.
True. Like, I mean, now you wouldn't even really need slave labor of humans. I mean, really, the smarter way to do it is through technology and machineries and robots.
Don't you remember
AI.
Foxconn?
No.
We had basically how we got iPhones was through borderline slave labor. Yeah, it was.
I feel like
maybe not necessarily. Maybe slave labor is not necessarily the best term, but abusive labor.
Yeah.
Where people were abused and forced to work in shitty conditions. I mean, child labor exists for a reason, because when people are super poor, everybody needs to work, right? So, there's a lot of controversy over things being made by child labor, but if you're buying stuff made by child labor and that allows a family to eat, is it then abusive? But the whole point is we want stuff so cheaply, right? Because we're the biggest contributors to terrible labor conditions because we want things to be so cheap.
Going back before any of that, it's because we have fallen victim to consumerism that we need all this shit.
Consumerism also advances, but consumerism
so
advances
wasteful,
technology.
And what's the point of advancing technology when we're destroying all the planet's resources? That all that technology is not going to fucking save us later.
I believe it will. I believe it's going to come full circle, and the advancement of AI will then
take us over, and then we're going to become just an AI planet.
It doesn't necessarily have to be take us over.
They'll just take our memories and plant it in an AI, and then they'll go on living.
It doesn't necessarily have to take us over to be able to come up with solutions beyond that are workable, because we're not willing as a species to take on what we need to take on a joint level. Because I mean this
is why we'll never become grabby aliens.
The benefit of having a one world government is that you could then force through the things that need to happen to make things better.
But how do we know it's going to actually make things better?
Well, but I'm just saying that
how do we keep them accountable?
You have there's no
who
perfect
determines
answer,
what's
right?
better? What is better?
Supposedly, if you believe in all this, you can't keep them accountable now. So what's it matter if we have a one world government or not? If we're all being manipulated by the elites, who gives a shit whether they're? Isn't it better if they're all working together and we have a more uniform, peaceful society than to have us all fighting? So,
but according to him, we're all fucked no matter what.
Right. Well, we were all fucked about 23 years ago because he thought the world was going to end in 2000. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, all those people banking on 2000 and Y2K.
He was one of them. He had multiple reasons to think that the world was going to end in 2000. Yeah. He believed that the Galileo space probe was going to crash into Jupiter and ignite it.
I mean, he wasn't wrong about everything.
All
he
right.
turned me into a newt. I got
think
better.
For now, we do plan on discussing this further.
Yeah, because we want to have a guest on the show.
Well, and I think we want to touch on some other. I want to touch on some other conspiracies.
Yeah, because I do too. Because there was
really
not enough
want to learn
time
about
in
the reptilian
me too.
overlords.
Okay, how about we both agree that we're gonna learn more about our reptilian overlords?
And I think we need to move on a little bit from the New World Order, because otherwise that's just going to take up all of our time.
I know. Sorry, it was really fun to
talk
about.
I think that's what a lot of the conspiracies are tied to.
Well, they keep coming back. It does keep coming back to that on multiple levels.
So I made this realization reading this other book and just kind of reading all this stuff, is that a lot of different conspiracy theories that are not necessarily connected are all connected by the idea that we are powerless and that there is somebody controlling and manipulating us. And pretty much all of the elite, and also that the elite are evil, and that the masses would by those means then be righteous.
Yeah, and that money rules all, and life means very little.
And somehow, just because to me it seems like just because this information talks against the elite, that it becomes automatically believed. But you can't. I don't think everything's a lie. I think there's a lot of lies, but I don't think everything is a lie. Sometimes shit happens.
No, it's fair.
Sometimes crises are going to happen. Sometimes groups of people get pissed off and find a way to do something about it.
Yeah. That's the thing. If you're really pissed off, and unfortunately, I feel like any form of movement to get to where the people want to go, whatever group that is and what they believe, hopefully to advance themselves forward to become better people and in better situations, the emotion of anger is a must. You can't
I think anger is one of our most manipulatable emotions.
But at the same time, complacency also gets you. Is also
complacency isn't the opposite of anger, though.
Complacency is just. I feel like you're just going to be okay with whatever happens, and until it's too late. I don't know. I feel like that is a form of abdication of doing anything to.
Right, but that's not the opposite of being angry.
Well, no one's going to be happy.
Right, but
paying off the.
But if you let your emotions get the best of you, then you are more likely to be manipulated.
But anybody that gets to where they want to go in life, individual, a group, they start with that emotion. I feel like we're given that emotion as a human to light a fire under your ass.
It doesn't somewhat mean survival, right?
Yeah, you don't need that as your defining emotion throughout the entire
But I think a lot of this ends up coming from people being angry to begin with, and then they get fed stuff that only increases that anger.
The Illuminati's not angry.
It becomes an echo chamber, right? I mean, that's how we become. We talked about that on our first show, right? The tribalism and getting, if you're reading stuff that feeds your beliefs, and makes you the victim, then that's much more easy to swallow than the world. Then just the world might be chaos. There might not be a lot of control going on. I think is a scarier thought for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
That they want, because a lot of this, a lot of conspiracies have a pretty religious connection as well.
Yeah.
And so they, people that are religious, I think, need to feel like something is in control of manipulating things. So that, that's why I don't think it's on such a uniform scale. There are manipulations that happen, but not everything that seems out of place is necessarily a manipulation.
True. It's not all, but I feel like it doesn't hurt to at least be on the lookout.
No, of course, right? Like, I try to be skeptical of all.
Yes,
right. But I'm also, I like information, and I didn't discount everything that Cooper wrote in the book. There was definitely, especially the stuff he would. I actually plan on going back and looking at a lot of the laws he quotes.
I know. I wanted more time to dive into some of these little things where wait a minute. There's something here, but hold on, I got to keep going because I got to, I agree.
I talked about there was the drug law one, and he talks about there's a quote in there, that you can be fined for tree spiking. And he's like, why are they attacking environmentalists in a drug law? And you go back and read the law. Well, it makes sense. I mean, it could be what he's saying, but it could also. The explanation is not unreasonable.
And
Occam, you got to think of Occam's razor as well.
Yes.
Right, and the simplest explanation is often the truth. Right. And a lot of times conspiracy explanations are much more complex.
Well, and again, I don't know why I'm defending him, but the point is, I imagine when if you start catching, it's your reticular activating system, your RAS, right? Basically, whatever your brain starts to focus on, you start seeing it everywhere. And that's
Right,
probably what
yeah.
happened to this man.
Like the idea that numbers mean something,
Yeah.
and so you start seeing that number
Yes.
everywhere.
It's the reticular activating system
Yeah.
in your brain. It's a very real thing. A simple explanation of that is if you're researching a car and
I
you're
was just
like,
gonna say the
oh,
car one,
yeah, and you want this specific red car, and you start driving down the freeway, you suddenly see that car everywhere. It's just how your brain works. So it makes sense that this poor man, before anybody knew what the hell an RAS was, he caught a few things, and his brain went into like.
Well, that's how people fall down the rabbit
yes,
hole too, right?
Yeah, like anything he reads and he looks into, that's why tree spiking, environmentalists, like he's just like making quick connections, which is why, when reading that book, I even, texted him going, ugh, this guy is scatterbrained all over the place. I'm like, I hope our podcast doesn't sound the same way, because it really kind of did though. And I knew that's my bad. I called that. But the thing is, it's
we
just
even
all
tried to just end it, and then we kept going.
I know we did, and I just because it's never ending.
It's an interesting topic, right?
It is.
You can't. I don't think you can fully discount conspiracy theories flat out. Although I would personally discount the flat earthers as the most ridiculous. I would actually believe in the reptilian shapeshifters before I believe in flat Earth.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
they've like
and
kind of proven
I think reptilian shapeshifters is pretty out there.
It is.
Personally.
It is, but,
But-
it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. Flat Earth is just. All right, we'll talk about more
that
next time.
That'll be next time. But I do want to make reference to some of the things that we did read and watch, so you are aware if you want to go back.
We'll add it into the description as well.
We have Behold a Pale Horse.
That was the primary. I think that was probably our primary source information.
Yes,
and
it spawned into
by William Cooper.
By William Cooper. I, per your recommendation, also watched Zeitgeist, a movie. I watched Zeitgeist Addendum, and then Zeitgeist Moving Forward, because there's 3. All excellent. The first 2 were more into the conspiracy theory, but they started shifting into like human behaviors and how we're manipulated, and they going into.
I would just say cross-reference.
Anyway,
If you watch it, look into it, because not everything is explained in a way that is true.
And seeing both sides of things. So,
Right.
because I was watching it,
an
texting
agenda
him,
as
going,
well.
"We don't have to file our taxes. There's no law." He's like, "That's not true." And then I
There's
looked it up.
actually
I'm
an
like,
amendment in the Constitution.
I know, I
that
saw
says
it.
we
It was
do.
like Amendment 16 or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I was like, all right, that's 100%
It's-
wrong.
they have
But again, that's the whole point.
Everybody has an agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything has an agenda. So that's ultimately, I think, what the point should be, is that everybody has an agenda. I would say our only agenda was to hopefully get you to watch, but it's still an agenda nonetheless. Everybody's got one, right? We don't do anything nobody does anything for no purpose. Otherwise, you would just be doing nothing. So this is only part 1. Part 2 will hopefully be posted also before the end of the month, assuming I will have time to edit it afterwards. And hopefully a previous guest, Michael McCain, will also be able to join us. He was unable to join us today, and hopefully he'll be able to join us next time. I think he will have some pretty interesting perspectives on a lot of what we have to say as well.
Indeed. And hopefully you got something out of this episode. If you did, great. If you didn't, we warned you, because
this could go either way.
Boom.
Yeah, that's right. But before we go, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like, subscribe, and share this with other people.
And comment
that are,
as well.
Comment, share.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Share,
Tell me I'm a sheep.
Share with
Tell
your
me
sheep
what-
friends.
Try
And
to
your elite friends.
Try to convince me that everything I said was fucking bullshit. I would love to hear.
I
it,
was
to be
trying
honest
today,
with
even though I'm kind of on his side too, but it was just fun.
you. I'm stubborn initially, but I'll think about it.
Yeah,
You know
because
what
we
I'm
have a
saying?
whole other episode to think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you guys on episode 2 for conspiracy theories.
All right, have a good one.